Hi, everybody. Get centered here. Welcome back to Patriots History of the United States. I'm Larry Swikart, co-author of Patriots History of the United States with Mike Allen. You see my books over here. Let's see, so much news. I am out doing the homeschool conventions, and so I won't be around next Friday. I'll be in Kissimmee, I don't know how you say it, Florida, for the Florida Parent Educators Association, probably the biggest homeschool convention in the country, I'm told. I was there last 2 years in a row. It was a really great convention. And then I'll be going to the California Great Homeschool Convention at Ontario in June. And then I'll be going to the Great Homeschool Convention in Texas at Austin at the Kalahari Resort in July. Sandwiched in between all of those, I have 3 really big speeches. One to the Republican Club of Palm Springs, which is huge. One to the Bullhead City Lincoln Day dinner, which again is going to be a big group. And then one to Young America's Foundation up at Santa Barbara at the Reagan Ranch. Why am I telling you all this? Because we're going to be intermittent for the next 6 weeks. I'll try to get some of these in, but I no sooner get back from a convention than I've got to prep to go to a speech or go to another convention. So I'll say we'll be really lucky if we finish the Civil War by August. In fact, the Civil War may drag on as long as the real Civil War drug on. Just kidding. But it's just going to slow down. I can't help it. Reminder to all of you, if you don't know, I have a full curriculum that goes with both U.S. and world history, geared toward high schoolers, 9 through 12. However, I have had 8th graders do it, and last convention, I even had a 7th grader come up and say they did it. I don't recommend that. An advanced 8th grader can do it, but it's really targeted for 9 through 12. The world history is definitely grades 10 through 12. It's a slightly more advanced course. The courses come with teacher's guides that walk you through Patriots history. I mean, paragraph by paragraph with prompts. And the teacher gets the answers. The student gets a workbook to write the answers down in. You also get tests, answer keys, including a built-in AP track if your student is going to be doing the AP test. This will prepare them for that. And so the test questions are the famous documents-based questions that you would see in an AP test. If you're not doing that, just ignore that. And then finally, of course, the best part, I teach every lesson in full high production video with slides behind me, maps, images, graphs, great stuff. And you can download all those too. Whole thing is downloadable with no license to expire. Let me say that again, no license to expire. If you've got several kids coming up, you can use it for every student. If you're in a co-op, you can use it in co-op, although I ask that if you've got more than 5 students, you buy an extra curriculum for every 5. But that's the honor system. I can't enforce that. The U.S. history course is, of course, based on Patriots history of the United States, line by line almost. And there is a new edition, Patriots history of the United States 20th anniversary edition, available only on PDF. It's 1 chapter from 2018 to 2023 and 20 pages of new additions or inserts you would put in as you go through the book. So how do you get that? Easy. Go to the Wild World of History, scroll down till you see sign up for the newsletter, and you should get a free copy of the PDF. If you don't, email me at larry@wildworldofhistory.com. Larry@wildworldofhistory.com. You'll get it. The world history course has no books in the first semester. It's all primary source documents free that you download. Second semester has a lot of reading. It's got Patriot's History of the Modern World, Volume 1 and 2 in PDF form. We sell them for only $9 each, so it's on the site. But it's a lot of reading. The lessons there are much larger and bigger than the lessons in the U.S. course. U.S. has 22 lessons, 22 videos. World History has 15 lessons, 15 videos. But it's great stuff. It's got all the big names of history: Napoleon, Marx, Churchill, Stalin, Mao, FDR, Reagan, Gorbachev. Everybody's in there. So take a look at those curricula. I got to tell you, it's May 17th. As I'm recording this, our prices go up on June 1st. We're raising prices. And then as soon as that last convention is over in July, it's back to the normal price, which is almost double the $199 that we offer at the conventions. I'm sorry, the $179 before the price goes up. $179 before the price goes up. What's the point? If you want to get your curriculum, get it now. Don't say, well, we're going to get this, but we want to put it off till later. It's going to be more expensive later. You know, this is the era of the Biden discount, add 20%. All right. So let's get started. I'm going to do one of these today. I'll try to do one more tomorrow and get them up. Maybe one more for Monday, and then I probably won't be back for a week. So we're in the Civil War, Chapter 9, Crisis of the Union. I am reading, as always, from the 15th anniversary edition. Now, that 20th anniversary edition, I got to say one more thing. When you get that free, you really need the 15th anniversary edition of the book to work from, because it jibes, it tells you to insert on pages based on the 15th anniversary edition. If you go back past the 10th anniversary edition, you're really out of starting on page 323, last paragraph. The commercial differences between the Union and Confederacy were even more striking. Much has been made of the railroad mileage, although depending on how one measured the tracks laid in the territories and the border states, some of the northern advantage disappears. The North had as many as 20,000 miles of track, whereas the South had perhaps 10,000. But even if these numbers were roughly equal, they would have been misleading. Southern roads tended to run east and west, which was an advantage as long as the Mississippi remained open and Texas's cattle and horses could be brought through Louisiana. But after New Orleans fell and Vicksburg fell and was all but surrounded, all livestock the Western Confederacy could supply were undeliverable. More important, Northern railroads often ran north and south, making for rapid delivery to the front lines of cannonballs, food, and clothing. Some southern states actually built tracks that only connected to rivers, such as at Muscle Shoals. Muscle Shoals, Alabama, is a famous rock and roll recording studio. That's where Leonard Skinner sang out Muscle Shoals. They have the Swamp Boys, and it's a U. Well, they built a railroad to connect one side of the river to the other, so you didn't have to sail all the way around the U. It's faster, but you got to unload on one side and then reload to a different ship or boat on the other side. So that's kind of the difference between a long straight road that, say, ran all the way from New York to Virginia, so you could just ship cannonballs right to the front. Some southern states actually built tracks that only connected to rivers with no connection to other railroads. And Alabama had laid a shortcut railroad that connected two Tennessee river points, as I said. Dominance by the North over the South in other areas was even more pronounced. 32-1 in firearms production, 14-1 in merchant shipping, 3-1 in farm acreage. Did you ever think about that the North had more food than the South? 412-1 in wheat, 2-1 in corn. Cotton might have been king at one time, but Southerners soon found that their monarch didn't make for good eating. Can't eat cotton. And the North controlled 94% of the manufactured cotton cloth and 90% of America's boot and shoe manufacturing. Pig iron manufacturing was almost entirely Northern, with all but a few of the nation's 286 furnaces residing from the Union. Those facilities churned out iron for 239 arms manufacturers, again overwhelmingly located north of the Mason-Dixon line. One county in Connecticut, which was home to 9 firearms factories, manufactured guns worth 10 times the value of all the firearms in the South in 1860. The South had one cannon foundry, the Tredegar Iron Works in Richmond. From Cyrus McCormick's Reaper factory in Chicago to the Paterson, New Jersey locomotive works, Northern manufacturing was poised to bury the South. In its Navy alone, the North had almost an insurmountable advantage, and Lincoln perceived this, announcing an immediate blockade of the South by sea. The blockade underscored Lincoln's definition of the war as an insurrection and a rebellion. Had the South had a navy, its seagoing commerce with England and France might have been substantial enough to legitimate its claims as being a nation. Winter set the rules, though, and the winner at sea was the Union Navy. And again, a manufacturing economy tends to produce manifold inventions. The Union's willingness to set the private sector free to invent, then purchase the products afterwards, led to a number of private sector weapons, including the Gatling gun, the Spencer repeating rifle. Even in the South, the breakthroughs came from private individuals such as Horace Lawson Hunley with his submarine. In a contest between a state-dominated economy, as the Confederacy was, and an economy largely reliant on the private sector, the North held another major edge. This is really important. In one of our sources, Yankee Leviathan, by a political scientist, not a historian, named Richard Bensell, who I met. He's quite a character. He compared the North's productivity and inventiveness and inventions to that of the South and found there was no comparison at all. And by the way, just to harp on this, this is what you get when you have plantation slavery, where 1/3 of the South's population are slaves and have no interest in inventing anything at all. Why make master's life easier? Bensell also found that when you compared 150 separate points of personal liberty, such things as being subjected to the military draft, confiscation of property by the state, taxation, state production, such as salt in Florida. The South relied a lot on government factories. The North didn't. Anyway, Bensell found in 150 separate comparisons that the North was vastly more free than the South, that the South was much more unfree for whites, not just for blacks, but for whites, i.e., you were much more likely to get drafted. Your property was much more likely to get stolen. Your currency was much more likely to be totally devalued and debased. And on and on. Okay, you're more likely to be thrown in jail. So that's an interesting thing to keep in mind. Usually, not always, but usually, the side with greater freedom tends to win conflicts. I mean, you could point to Athens and Sparta, and perhaps, but again, you look at World War II. And the United States just buried everybody else put together, even the Ruskies. The U.S. outproduced more than every other nation put together, except you add in Russia, the line comes to just like this much more. But without Russia, we outproduced Germany, Japan, Italy, Britain, France, whoever else you want to throw in there, because of a free economy. And we'll get to that when we get to World War II. Point is, this is a massive advantage. You can't replace men. When men die, sooner or later, you're going to run out of men. But it's almost as bad trying to replace cannons that get blown up that take months to create, to forge. If you can't do that in mass numbers, you're going to lose. Yet, even with these advantages, the Union still faced a daunting task. All the South had to do to succeed was survive. The Confederates did not have to invade the North, and every year that passed brought the reality of an independent Confederate nation ever closer. The American Revolution had taught that all an army of resistance need do is avoid destruction. Remember, this was Washington's genius. He kept the army together, didn't lose the one big battle that would have put us out of the war. Yeah, he lost a lot of little battles, but he was always able to escape with the army, and that's key. And what you're going to see with Lee, and I'm going to be a real critic of Lee, especially for his aggressive tactics in invading the North twice. But nevertheless, what you'll see with Lee was he was always wise enough to keep his Army of Northern Virginia intact. And that is all the way up till Gettysburg. And after that, it was downhill. And more in 1861 than in 1776, the technology favored the defender. Combinations of earthworks with repeating or breech-loading rifles, long-range cannons, mass transportation with railroads and steam vessels meant that defenders could resist many times their number and receive timely reinforcements or perform critical withdrawals. Moreover, the United States had only a small professional army by European standards. And after 1861, that army was reduced by about half as Southerners resigned to fight for the Confederacy. As a result, both sides relied heavily on militia troops. Militia units, as was learned in the Revolution and the War of 1812, had important strengths and failings. Village militia units comprised of all men of ages 15 through 50 mustered once a year, trained and drilled irregularly, and provided their own weapons. But militias lacked critical discipline, professionalism, and experience that regular soldiers possessed, leading Samuel Clemens to refer to his militia company as a, quote, cattle herd, in which an argument broke out between a corporal and a sergeant, neither of whom knew who outranked the other. To overcome these weaknesses, state militias were retained intact as units, ensuring that Ohioans, Mainers, or as I like to call them, maniacs, and New Yorkers fought together. Now, this enhanced unit cohesion and loyalty, but it also produced tragic results when the order of battle hurled the manhood of entire towns into enemy guns. As a result, some towns saw an entire generation disappear in 4 years of war. Now, you remember the great movie Gettysburg, and Jeff Daniels is with the 20th Maine. I don't know where they were stationed. He was a professor at Bowdoin College. So whatever is around Bowdoin, I guess, would be where those militia members came from. And they were later joined by the 2nd Maine, which had been severely depleted from about 1,000 men to about 200. And the 20th Maine, Jeff Daniels' group, Colonel Chamberlain, his regiment had gone from 1,000 to 450. All from the same town or same county. I mean, that's a lot of young men to lose, right? And it's just got to crush a community that sees a whole company wiped out. See where we're going to go here. Okay. The militia regular army volunteer units became, quote, largely a personal thing in which, quote, anyone who wished to advertise to raise a company and invite all willing to join and come on a certain morning to some saloon, hotel, or public hall. Units that emerged predictably had flashy names and even glitzier uniforms, including the Buena Vista Guards, the New York Fire Zouaves, the Polish Legion, and the St. Patrick's Brigade, the Garibaldi Guards, and again, predictably, the Lincoln Guards. Some, such as the Wisconsin Black Hats, also known as the Iron Brigade, were famous for their headgear, while the New York Zouave units copied the French Army's baggy red trousers, like you'd see in the French Foreign Legion, right? Some of the extremely decorative uniforms soon gave way to more practical battlefield gear. You don't want to be on a battlefield dressed in red. But the enthusiasm did not dim. The 6th Massachusetts, a regiment of 850 men, marched to Washington only 48 hours after Lincoln's call for volunteers. And between the time the president issued the call for 75,000 volunteers in April And the time Congress convened in July, the Northern Army had swollen to more than 215,000 over its pre-Sumter troop levels. Now, that's not all good. You got to feed these guys, but more important, you got to train these guys. They're useless to you if they're just bodies there. As the French found out in the Franco-Prussian War, the French had a much larger army than the Germans, but most of their army were these put together pipsqueak regiments of people kind of playing at being a soldier. And they of course would fall apart during a march. They wouldn't maintain discipline, which meant you could never stage an assault on time or together because they were straggling in, you know, and so it's a big problem. Illinois and Indiana in particular outdid themselves, with Illinois furnishing 172% of its quota, Indiana 158%. Instead of too few men, the Union's greatest problem at the outset of the conflict was too many. Secretary of War Cameron complained that he was receiving troops faster than the government can provide for them. When the first weary soldiers marched into Washington to defend the Capitol, all that awaited them was salted and red herring, yuck, soda crackers, and coffee made in rusty cauldrons. Those who marched to the front were more fortunate than others, crammed into the coastal vessels and steamed down the New England port cities. Regardless of their mode of transportation, most of the young men who donned the uniform in either the North or the South had never been more than 20 miles from their home in their life, nor had they ever ridden a steamboat. Many had never even seen a large city. All right. I think let's stop there. Let me just tell you a little story. Years ago, someone I knew gave me a diary of someone in their family who'd been in the Civil War from Vermont. And I read through it, and it was kind of interesting, but it was kind of boring because this poor guy, or maybe lucky guy, never saw a major battle. Ironically, he would get to every battle. His regiment would get to every battle right after the battle was over. And he ended up standing guard at Antietam and at many other smaller battles, but never fired a shot. And so I entitled the article, "Those Also Serve Who Stand and Wait," because it's true. You need guards. You need people guarding railroads, bridges, telegraph lines. You need sentries, picket duty. You need scouts. Many of these people will never get involved in a fight, right? You need cooks. You need bandsmen every once in a while to strike up a tune. You need a lot of people who are not carrying a musket and shooting at the other guy. The ratio in our World War II units was about 10 to 1. 10 men behind the line supporting every one at the front who is actually shooting. So kind of keep that in mind, that you're going to hear fantastic numbers of armies, but that doesn't necessarily mean that if you have an army of 200,000, they're all going to be thrown into battle at once. It might mean that only 20 or 30,000 of them will actually see gunfire. Some will be held in reserve, so on and so forth. Anyway, just something to keep in mind. All right, I think that'll do it for this session. We'll pick up again next session. Remember, my new book, Patriot's History of Globalism, is out now. Get a copy. Remember that on the Wild World of History, we have a VIP service that has 7 ongoing video lesson series totaling almost 30 hours of videos on Reagan, the American president, Churchill and his life, on Howard Zinn and his horrible history, on the 1620 default, why the 1619 project is wrong, many, many others. And if you join the VIP for $6 a month, you will get all of my first 2 years worth of Wild Wednesday webcasts, where I did an hour-long webcast every Wednesday night on a different history topic, everything from Hitler to the income tax, to the Crusades, to the charge of the Winged Hussars, to Prohibition. Some 50 hours of additional videos there on history subjects at the Wild World of History VIP. So consider signing up for that. Only $6 a month. I know money is tight, but believe me, if you use it, if you get into it, it is worth it, because you will provide your kids with all sorts of wonderful videos and written work. There's all sorts of 1- and 2-page blogs on historical topics that they can use to help them write papers, develop debate ideas, whatever. I will see you guys back here next time. I'll try and get another one of these out before the end of the weekend.